Hi everyone, Mr. Hamilton here. Today we're going to look at describing climates. Now yesterday we looked at some of the factors that affect climate change, and so we're going to take a step back now and look at how do we actually describe climates. This is going to be some review from geography in previous years, but hopefully it'll be helpful as we think about this idea of climate and climate changing. So let's do a little bit of review from yesterday first, and that is this. Atmosphere. The atmosphere is a layer of gases. It's a layer of gases that surrounds a planet or moon. Weather. That's the state of the atmosphere at a specific place and time. And it included a few things. It includes the heat, so how hot it is. It includes the cloudiness. It includes the dryness, the sunshine, the wind, the rain, etc. And then climate. Now I've added something here that we didn't necessarily have yesterday. Climate is the characteristic pattern of weather, conditions in a region. And those weather conditions include a few different things. They include the temperature, the wind speed, and they include the precipitation. There's other things it would include as well, but those are the main things. Precipitation. Now, this is over a long period of time, and this is what I want to be clear about. I'm not sure I was super clear about yesterday. This is something that has to be collected over a long period of time, not just 1 year and then done, or 1 day and then done. All right, with those in mind, let's move on to a couple other things I want to review, and that is greenhouse gases. Well, we've looked at gases that make up the atmosphere, so this is going to be a little bit different today because greenhouse gases aren't nitrogen and oxygen as we looked at yesterday. There are a couple of other things that are greenhouse gases. And so let's look at the blanks before we get to the types of gases. Gases that are found in Earth's atmosphere, those are greenhouse gases. They're found in Earth's atmosphere. And they trap heat and energy. In fact, they trap heat energy from escaping Earth and help to keep our planet warm. Again, if we didn't have greenhouse gases, that would be a bad thing. So we do need some greenhouse gases. What makes up these greenhouse gases are things like methane, CH4 is methane. They're also made up from things like carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is part of the natural cycle of life, and so CO2 is needed to help warm our atmosphere. And then we have water vapor. Those are all types of greenhouse gases. All right. With that in mind, let's move on to the hydrosphere. The hydrosphere is the collective mass of water. So it's all the water everywhere. It's the collective mass of water found on, under, and over the surface of Earth in the form of water, ice, and water vapor. So blanks there: Earth, water, ice, and water vapor. And then we didn't get into this topic yesterday, but just so we're clear on what this is, there's something called albedo. And what albedo is, if you think about something, if I make a cloth here, and this cloth is black, let's color it into, obviously it's not black, it's red, but if I color it in, and I make another cloth here, and let's assume this is white, what happens is certain substances, and black and white are the extreme examples, certain substances are more likely to reflect light, and certain substances are more likely to absorb light. And black, obviously, if you wear black out on a hot summer day, is going to get very warm. Whereas white, if you wear that on a hot summer day, you don't get as hot. And so white is going to reflect more of the light, whereas black is going to absorb more of the light. And so that is what albedo is. Albedo is the ability to reflect light. If you have a high albedo, what that means is that there's good reflection. So something that's white would have good reflection, have a high albedo. If you have a low albedo, that would mean there's poor reflection. Something that's black absorbs, it doesn't reflect, it has a low albedo. And then the last term that we learned from yesterday is anthropogenic, relating to or resulting from the influence of humans. And so for some of us, that's where we're trying to get our minds around and try to understand this issue of climate change. how far are our human actions influencing climate change? Are they? Is it caused by anthropogenic reasons? And that's what we're going to get into as we get into some of the data later on. All right, with that review, let's just remind ourselves that climate is the average characteristic pattern of weather conditions in a region over a long period of time. And here in southern Ontario, we're more eastern Ontario, but you can see from this diagram there that kind of all clumped up. It's southern Ontario. When you look at how big Ontario actually is, we are still technically part of southern Ontario, I guess. It has a moist mid-lateral climate with cold winters, right? We all could agree that we have cold winters. This winter wasn't too bad, although we have had snow lately, so has cold springs, it seems. All right. Climate zones are geographic locations that share similar weather conditions. In tropical zones, the temperature is warm and doesn't vary throughout the year. Polar zones are cold all year round and covered in ice. Temperate zones have a large range in temperature with distinct warm and cold seasons. And so what you can see for us is that we live in this temperate zone. We get very cold winters and very warm summers. Whereas if you're that north polar zone, you tend to get very cold winters and not as warm summers as the north temperate zone. And then much like the temperature swings we see, the south temperate zone sees those same type of temperature swings. If you live in this tropical zone, you're not going to see very big temperature swings at all throughout the year because your angle to the sun is going to be pretty consistent overall. The unequal heating of the Earth's surface is what causes these climate zones, right? We're tilted towards the Earth, and the Earth changes that tilt throughout the seasons, and that's why we have that. All right, now you need your textbooks here. If you haven't got it out yet, it'd be good to have out. As we go through here, I'm just going to point out some key pages that you should be looking at. You could write these pages down. They're on your handout as well. But you should be looking at climatographs on page 280. Then we're going to look at biomes on page 283. And finally, systems to track climate change, which include ecozones and ecoregions on page 286. And so there's some good diagrams that go on. I'm going to show you some here, but there are some others in your textbook that'll be worth checking out. First thing, climatographs. Now you're familiar with these, I'm sure. But if you're just struggling to remember how they work, they are used to compare the climate of different regions. Okay, so this particular climatograph is for Wellington, New Zealand. So it's completely foreign to us because we don't live there. So it's a very different track than we might see ourselves. We're going to try to highlight some of those differences. But first I want to go over these other points. Based on the average precipitation and temperature. So you can see here that average precipitation is on the left side and the average temperature is on the right side. Now the blue, that is the average precipitation, and then the red dots, that is the average temperature. So make sure that when you're reading temperature, you're looking at the right side, and the red, and blue, you're looking at the left side and the blue. This has taken over several years. Well, someone might say, well, why is it taking over several years? Well, we know that just this last winter, we had a relatively warm winter in Ottawa. That was not the average. If we take that over 10 years, we're going to find most winters are much colder. And so that just changes over time. And so we need an average to actually be able to see, is that actually changing in real time? Like, is it actually changing over a long period of time? Or is it just that we had a one-off time that was warm or a lot of rain or something? Anyway, looking at this particular climatograph, we have Wellington, New Zealand. And you can see here that if you look at the temperature and you think 80 degrees, you're reading that wrong, right? Because the temperature, the red, is on the right. So we can see there that the average daily temperature for them in January was about 9 degrees Celsius. That's very different than us, right? Hence I said this is a very foreign climate to us. We typically have obviously minus 20, minus 10, minus 20, somewhere like that in January. Then as it goes to become spring, they're going to begin to see in April, it gets up to about 12, almost 11 degrees. And then by the time we get to the warmest day, July, they're at 16 degrees Celsius. Now, I wouldn't think this would be a very fun place to live because if you look at the average precipitation as well, they have a half a foot of rain in January and February and in March pretty much. And even in the summer, there's quite a bit of rain. And they're not getting any snow because it's not cold enough really. And so they're getting tons of rain and they're never really getting that warm. So they're always going to have to wear, at the very least, spring jackets even in the mornings. It wouldn't be a great place to live, but nonetheless, there are a lot of people who do, right? And they make that home and they make it count. I'm sure that some people who don't appreciate minus 20 weather, would at least appreciate living here. All right, so that's climatographs. Biomes. Biomes are another classification system in the biosphere. It takes into account abiotic factors, so temperature and precipitation, so factors that aren't living. And then biotic factors are factors that have to do with living things. So what kind of plants are living there, what kind of trees are living there, that kind of thing. Perhaps some animals that live there as well. Canada has 7 biomes. We have permanent ice, tundra, boreal forest, temperate deciduous forest, temperate rainforest, grassland, and desert. And if you know anything about our biomes, we have a boreal forest here in Ottawa. And you can see right there we are on that map. We are part of the boreal forest biome. Now we can also classify that according to these ecozones. And the boreal forest is, if you see this here and how this lines up with the color, this is part of where we are. It's showing here that is part of the boreal shield. This is also, as far as I'm aware, also known to be part of the taiga as well. This map doesn't quite show that, but I believe that's also how you can classify our ecozone that we're in. But you can see there's all these different shield ecoregions and everything. I'm not expecting you to know all these. I'm just expecting you to see this and be familiar with them and be able to read this map. Ecozones are a division of Earth's surface that's separated by an ocean, desert, or mountain range. And then ecoregions are more specific subdivisions of that. So they're a subdivision of an ecoregion that's characterized by local landforms like plains, lakes, and mountains. And so if you see page 287 on your text, it gives you a good diagram of some of the ecoregions that we can see. Again, don't memorize all those. You don't need to know them all. You just need to be able to look at something like that and be able to figure out, oh, look at that. And hopefully I'm reading this right because you know I'm colorblind. Look at that. I'm part of the boreal shield. Okay. Many human activities depend on climate. Obviously, farming does. We've seen wildfires in Australia even this year. We've seen flooding all over the world that completely destroys crops. And so climate change may cause lifestyle changes, right? There's no doubt as the climate changes, we need to change and adapt to that climate as it's changing. And so these systems that we've just mentioned help to predict such changes and to manage them. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask via a message or an email, and make sure you complete the questions that are listed on our Edmodo page for today.